For the 5th time, they forgot to invite me for Christmas, so I bought a mountain house just for myself. A week later, they showed up with a spare key to intrude, thinking I was alone. Little did they know I had a police officer, cameras, and a lawyer by my side. I wasn't supposed to find out about their Christmas plans this year. The invitation that never came wasn't meant to be discussed in my presence. But when your 8-year-old grandson FaceTimes you because he misses you, secrets have a way of spilling out. Grandma, why aren't you coming for Christmas again? Ethan's innocent face filled my iPad screen, his forehead wrinkled in genuine confusion. What do you mean, sweetheart? I kept my voice light, though something cold settled in my stomach. Dad said, "You're busy this year. Are you going somewhere fun instead? Can I come with you?" Behind him, I could see the familiar wallpaper of my son Michael's living room. Holiday decorations already adorning every surface. It was only December 1st. "I'm not sure what your dad means, Ethan. No one's talked to me about Christmas plans yet." His little face scrunched up. "But everyone's coming to our house. Mom's making lists. She has a special folder called Christmas 2023 with everyone's names. I saw it. Is my name on that list, Ethan?" Before he could answer, a hand appeared taking the iPad from him. My daughter-in-law, Victoria's perfectly made-up face replaced Ethan's. "Ethan, you know you're not supposed to use the iPad without asking," she scolded, then noticed me. "Oh, Eleanor, sorry about that. He's going through a boundary testing phase." "Victoria, I was just asking Ethan about Christmas. It seems you're hosting." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, we're still finalizing details. Nothing set in stone, I see." I kept my face pleasantly neutral, a skill perfected over 62 years of life and 39 years of teaching university students. "Well, when you do finalize things, please let me know. I'd love to see the grandchildren. Of course I should go. Ethan needs to finish his homework. Say goodbye to Grandma Ethan." I heard his muffled, "Bye, Grandma," before the call ended. Sitting alone in my too quiet house, I stared at the blank screen for several long moments. This would be the 5th Christmas in a row. 5 years since David died. 5 years of increasingly transparent excuses. "We're keeping it small this year, Mom. The kids have been exposed to something at school. We don't want to risk getting you sick." "Oh, didn't Michael tell you we changed plans last minute?" I looked around the house that David and I had shared for 40 years, where we'd raised 3 children and hosted countless holiday gatherings. The house that had once burst with laughter and arguments and life now felt like a museum of memories. At that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending and accommodating for 5 lonely years, finally broke. I opened my laptop and navigated to my banking portal. The balance of my account still startled me sometimes. David had been a brilliant financial planner, investing steadily throughout our marriage. Then there was my family inheritance, which had grown substantially under his management. Our children had no idea, largely because David and I had chosen to live modestly, prioritizing experiences over possessions. They assumed the teacher's pension was all I had. They thought I needed their financial help, which made their neglect even more gling. They didn't neglect me because they thought I was poor. They neglected me despite thinking I was poor. My finger hovered over the trackpad for only a moment before I clicked over to a real estate website. I'd been idly browsing mountain properties for months, a daydream, a way to imagine a different life. But suddenly, it wasn't a daydream anymore. 3 hours later, I scheduled a viewing for a property I'd admired online for weeks, a contemporary mountain home with panoramic views, Florida to ceiling windows, and complete privacy on 5 wooded acres. It was listed at $1.2 million, a figure that would shock my children speechless. The realtor Diane seemed skeptical when I arrived alone for the viewing the next day. "This property is quite an investment." she said carefully, eyeing my sensible shoes and simple coat. Most of our buyers in this price range are couples or families looking for vacation homes. I'm not most buyers, I replied simply. As we toured the house, something settled in my chest. A feeling of rightness I hadn't experienced since before David died. The soaring windows that showcase the mountains beyond the massive stone fireplace. The gourmet kitchen where I could finally try all those complicated recipes I'd saved. There's a security system already installed, Diane mentioned, as we walked through the primary suite. The previous owners were quite security conscious. Top-of-the-line cameras, motion sensors, the works. The monitoring subscription would need to be reactivated, of course. I nodded, already imagining myself here, safe and independent. I'll take it, I said. Diane blinked. Don't you want to think it over? Perhaps discuss it with family? I've been thinking it over for months, I said truthfully, and my family isn't involved in my financial decisions. 2 weeks later, I signed the final paperwork and received the keys to my new home. The process had moved quickly thanks to my ability to make a substantial cash offer. As I drove up the winding road to what was now my mountain retreat, snowflakes began to fall, dusting the pines that lined the driveway. Inside, I walked from room to room, running my hands along countertops and window frames that belonged to me alone. No memories here, no ghosts, no disappointed expectations. I activated the security system, immediately setting up the app on my phone that would allow me to monitor the property from anywhere. Then I called the one person who had remained a true friend through everything. Marcus, it's a Lelenar. I've done something either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. I laughed, the sound echoing in the empty house, and I could use some legal advice about establishing residency and updating my will. Marcus Winters had been David's best friend since college and had become my rock after David's death. As I explained what I'd done, his initial surprise gave way to wholehearted support. "It's about damn time you did something for yourself, Ellie," he said warmly. "I'll come up this weekend to help you get settled. We'll review all the paperwork and make sure everything's in order." As I ended the call, I stood at the wall of windows, watching snow blanket the mountains. For the first time in 5 years, I was looking forward to Christmas, a Christmas that would be entirely my own. The first week in my mountain home passed in a blur of deliveries and decisions. I'd brought only personal items from my old house, choosing to furnish this new space entirely from scratch. Each purchase felt like a declaration. This is who I am now. This is what I like. No more accommodating David's preference for traditional furniture. No more keeping the children's outdated bedrooms pristine for visits that rarely happened. Every choice, from the sleek sectional sofa to the queen-size bed with its adjustable base, prioritized my comfort alone. "You're nesting." Marcus observed on Friday evening, arriving with his overnight bag and a bottle of expensive champagne. His salt and pepper hair was dusted with snowflakes. His familiar face creased with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. "Is that what this is?" I laughed, taking the champagne. I thought I was having a late-life crisis. A crisis involves poor decision-making. This, he gestured around the open concept living area with its breathtaking twilight mountain view, is possibly the most sensible thing you've done in years. After showing him to the guest room, I gave Marcus the full tour, ending in the home office where I'd set up the security system's monitoring station. Multiple screens displayed feeds from cameras positioned around the property's perimeter and at each entrance. "Quite the command center," Marcus remarked, raising an eyebrow. Planning for a siege. Just being practical. I'm a woman living alone in a relatively remote location. I didn't mention the nagging fear that my children might not respect my boundaries once they discovered my new home. Some instinct told me to keep that concern to myself for now. Over dinner, a bouillabaisse I'd always wanted to try cooking but never had because Michael claimed to hate seafood. Marcus helped me work through the practicalities of my new life. We discussed updating my will, changing my official residence, and notifying relevant institutions of my new address. What about the old house, he asked, refilling our wine glasses. I'm considering selling it, I admitted. There's nothing keeping me there anymore. A flash of concern crossed his face. Have you told your children about any of this? Not yet. I traced the rim of my glass, avoiding his gaze. They haven't called, not even to discuss Christmas plans that apparently don't include me. Marcus's expression darkened. He'd witnessed my increasing isolation over the past 5 years, had seen how my children's visits became shorter and less frequent, how they forgot to include me in family gatherings while simultaneously making comments about my modest lifestyle and suggesting senior living facilities. They take after their father in all the wrong ways, he said quietly. David had been brilliant and driven, but also controlling and status conscious. I'd balanced those tendencies during our marriage, but without my influence, those traits had flourished unchecked in our children. I keep wondering where I went wrong. I confess, the wine loosening my usual reserve. Was I too indulgent, too critical? Did I not teach them empathy? You didn't go wrong, Ellie. Some people just make selfish choices even when raised with better values. He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. The question now is, what do you want your relationship with them to look like going forward? I considered this as we moved to the sofa with our wine. The fireplace cast a warm glow over the room, snow falling gently beyond the windows. I want a relationship based on mutual respect, I said finally. Not obligation, not pity, and certainly not convenience when it suits them. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps this, he gestured around the room, is the perfect opportunity to reset those expectations. The next morning brought more snow and an unexpected visitor. I was arranging newly delivered books on the shelves when the security system chimed, alerting me to movement at the front entrance. On the monitor, I saw a man in his early 40s wearing a heavy jacket, a police department knit cap pulled over his ears. He carried a basket of some kind and was looking directly at the doorbell camera. "Good morning," he said, his voice coming through the system speaker. "I'm James Cooper, your neighbor from down the road. Thought I'd welcome you to the mountain." I hesitated only briefly before using the intercom. "That's very kind. I'll be right there." James Cooper stood a good 6 and taller than my 5'5" frame, with broad shoulders and a face weathered by outdoor living. Despite his imposing physical presence, his smile was gentle as he handed me the basket. "Homemade sourdough, local honey, and a decent bottle of whiskey," he explained. "Mountain essentials. That's incredibly thoughtful. Would you like to come in for coffee? I just made a fresh pot." Over steaming mugs at my kitchen island, I learned that James was a police officer currently on medical leave, recovering from a shoulder injury sustained in the line of duty. He lived year-round in a cabin about half a mile down the mountain road. "Not many full times up here," he noted, glancing appreciatively around the house. "Most properties are weekend retreats for city folks who rarely bother to introduce themselves. I'm planning to live here permanently," I explained, surprising myself with how right those words felt. "I recently retired from teaching. On your own." He asked, then immediately backpedaled. "Sorry, that's none of my business. It's fine. Yes, I'm on my own. My husband passed away 5 years ago, and my children have their own lives." The simplified version of a complicated reality. James nodded, seeming to understand what I wasn't saying. "Well, mountain neighbors look out for each other. I'm just down the road if you ever need anything." He scribbled his number on a notepad on my counter. "Cell service can be spotty during storms, but I've got a landline that never fails. And I'm usually home these days while this shoulder heals." After he left, I stood at the window watching him navigate the snowy path back to the road. There was something reassuring about knowing someone was nearby, someone who had chosen this same solitude but remained open to connection. That evening, as Marcus prepared to return to the city, he noticed James' number on the counter. "Making friends already?" he asked with a smile. "Just getting to know the neighbors," I replied. "James says there aren't many year-round residents." "James is." Marcus's eyebrows rose teasingly. "Should I be jealous that you've replaced me as your emergency contact so quickly?" I laughed and swatted his arm. "Don't be ridiculous. He's young enough to be my son and much more attentive than your actual son." Marcus observed pointedly as we hugged goodbye at the door. He held me a moment longer than usual. "I'm proud of you, Ellie. This is your second act. Make it everything you want it to be." Watching his taillights disappear down the snowy road, I felt a curious lightness. For the first time in decades, my life was entirely my own to shape. 2 weeks passed in peaceful solitude. I established routines that pleased no one but myself. Morning yoga facing the mountains afternoons, reading by the fireplace evenings, experimenting with complex recipes I'd always wanted to try. I spoke with Marcus every few days and exchanged friendly waves with James when our paths crossed on the private road we shared. I'd almost forgotten about Christmas until my phone rang on December 18th. Michael's name appeared on the screen. My first contact from any of my children since moving to the mountain. "Mom," he said when I answered his voice, carrying that familiar note of forced patience. "Where have you been? I've tried calling the house twice this week." "Hello, Michael. I've been at home." "No, you haven't. I drove by yesterday and the house was dark. Your car wasn't in the driveway, so he'd been checking up on me. Not out of concern, I suspected, but to confirm I'd be alone for Christmas again, making their exclusion less guilt-inducing." "I've moved," I said simply, a beat of silence. "Moved. Moved where you didn't say anything about moving. I wasn't aware I needed permission." The words came out sharper than I'd intended, years of suppressed hurt finding their voice. "Of course you don't need permission," he backpedaled quickly. "It's just, this is sudden. Where are you living now, some senior community?" The assumption stung. "No, Michael. I've bought a house in the mountains." What his shock would have been comical under different circumstances. "Mom, that's how could you possibly afford your father and I were always good with money," I replied, deliberately vague. "But your pension, the maintenance on mountain properties, the isolation he seemed to be processing out loud, recalibrating his understanding of my circumstances in real time. I'm perfectly comfortable, thank you." "Now, was there something specific you were calling about?" Another pause. "Actually, yes. We've been trying to finalize Christmas plans. Samantha and Daniel are bringing the kids to our house for Christmas Eve. Then we're all thinking of taking a little holiday trip someplace with snow for the children. The perfect opening. Yet he still wasn't inviting me. 5 years of exclusion had made it habitual. "That sounds lovely. I hope you all enjoy yourselves." "Right." "Well," he cleared his throat, "you'll be all right on your own for the holidays." "I'm planning my own Christmas this year," I said truthfully. "Something special." After ending the call, I sat watching snowflakes dance outside the windows, an uneasiness settling over me. The conversation felt like reconnaissance, Michael confirming I had no expectations of inclusion before finalizing their plans. My suspicions were confirmed 2 days later when the security system alerted me to a vehicle approaching. Through the kitchen window, I recognized Michael's luxury SUV crawling up my driveway, moving slowly as if the driver was uncertain of the destination. The vehicle stopped. Michael emerged, looking up at the house with an expression of disbelief. He snapped several photos with his phone before returning to his car and driving away. I called Marcus immediately. He didn't even knock. I explained watching Michael's car disappear down the mountain road on the security feed. Just took pictures and left. "That's concerning," Marcus said, his lawyer's caution evident. "How did he even find your address? I'm not sure." I hadn't shared my new address with any of my children yet. The property records wouldn't be updated this quickly, would they? Unlikely. Could he have followed you? Or perhaps the real estate agent mentioned something. We ended the call with Marcus promising to check if the property transfer had been recorded publicly yet. I tried to dismiss my uneasiness, but that night I double-checked every door and window before bed. The next morning brought a flurry of texts from all 3 of my children, the most communication I'd received from them in months. From Michael: "Mom, we need to talk about this house situation. Call me ASAP." From Samantha: "Since when do you have money for a vacation home? We need to discuss this as a family." From Daniel: "Are you sure this purchase is a good idea at your age? Living alone in the mountains seems risky." I responded to none of them, choosing instead to drive into town for groceries and final Christmas preparations. I decided to host a small dinner on Christmas Eve. Just myself, Marcus, and James, who had mentioned having no family nearby. When I returned home that afternoon loaded with packages and food, something felt immediately wrong. The security system showed no alerts, but a subtle difference in the arrangement of the entryway bench caught my attention. I sat down my bags and checked the security app on my phone, reviewing footage from the past few hours. At 2:17 p.m., a car I recognized as Samantha's had pulled into my driveway. The exterior camera captured her and Daniel approaching my front door, looking around furtively. Samantha reached into her purse and pulled out what appeared to be a key. My heart raced as I watched them let themselves into my home. My home. The interior cameras showed them wandering through every room, opening closets, examining furniture, peering at price tags I hadn't yet removed. Their commentary was picked up clearly by the microphones. "This place must have cost at least $1 million. Samantha," clears throat, said, running her hand along my new kitchen countertop. "Where the hell did she get that kind of money? Dad must have had investments we didn't know about." Daniel replied, opening my refrigerator and helping himself to a bottled water without hesitation. "She certainly couldn't afford this on a teacher's pension. Did you see the view? This location is prime real estate. Think about the family gatherings we could host here. So much better than her old house. Michelle's already making plans. We're all coming up for Christmas." "Surprise her," he says. Samantha laughed as if this is somehow still her decision. My hand shook as I fast-forwarded through their 40-minute invasion of my privacy. Before leaving, Samantha placed something on the kitchen counter, a spare key, which she pointed to while saying something to Daniel about making sure everyone has access. I checked the front door. It was locked, meaning they had re-locked it when leaving. If I hadn't reviewed the security footage, I might never have known they had been inside my home. Fighting rising panic, I called Marcus, then James. Within 30 minutes, both men arrived. James still in his police uniform from an earlier shift. They had a key. I said, my voice steadier than I felt as I showed them the footage. Samantha used a key to enter my house without permission. The only way they could have a key is if someone from the real estate transaction provided it. Marcus said grimly, which would be highly unethical, possibly illegal. James studied the security footage with professional focus. "This is textbook trespassing," he confirmed. "Having a key doesn't grant legal permission to enter someone's home without consent." I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the kitchen island. They're planning to come here for Christmas, all of them. Michael said, "They're going to surprise me. Do you want to change the locks?" James asked practically. "I want them to understand they can't just invade my life whenever it suits them," I replied, a lifetime of accommodating suddenly giving way to righteous anger. I want them to face consequences for once. Marcus and James exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus asked carefully. "I want to be prepared when they arrive." I said, my resolve strengthening. "Not caught off guard, not emotional, not vulnerable. I want to meet them from a position of power." James nodded approvingly. "The element of surprise should be yours, not theirs." "Exactly." I paced the kitchen, ideas forming rapidly. They think they're surprising me, but we'll be waiting for them. The question is, what exactly do I want to happen when they show up? Marcus leaned against the counter, his legal mind already working. "We should consider the practical aspects first. When do you think they'll arrive? Christmas Eve seems most likely," I reasoned. Based on Samantha's comments about Michael's plans that gives us 3 days to prepare, James said his tactical training evident in his approach. "First priority is securing the property. I'd recommend changing the locks immediately." "I agree," Marcus added. "We should also find out how they obtained a key in the first place." The next morning, I called Diane, my real estate agent, and explained the situation as diplomatically as possible. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm absolutely horrified." She responded, genuine distress in her voice. "I can assure you no one from our agency would provide keys to anyone without your explicit authorization. Yet somehow, my daughter has a key to my house," I replied, keeping my tone measured. "A house whose address I haven't shared with any of my children." After promising to investigate immediately, Diane called back within the hour. "I've discovered what happened," she said, her voice tight with professional embarrassment. "Your son Michael contacted our office last week claiming to be helping you move. He said you were having mobility issues and had asked him to coordinate some deliveries. The calculated nature of the deception made my stomach turn. And someone believed this without verifying with me. One of our new administrative assistants. Yes, she provided a key to him thinking she was being helpful. I've already initiated disciplinary proceedings. This is a serious breach of protocol. By that afternoon, a locksmith had changed every external lock on the house, and James had helped me upgrade the security system to include alerts for any attempted use of invalid keys. Marcus, meanwhile, had drawn up a formal notice of trespass that could be presented if necessary. "You sure you want to take such a hard line?" Marcus asked as we reviewed the document. "Once certain legal boundaries are established, it may be difficult to return to a more casual family relationship." I considered his words carefully, looking out at the mountains that had become my sanctuary. "I'm not doing this to punish them, Marcus. I'm doing it to establish clear boundaries. For too long, they've treated me as an accessory to their lives, someone to be included or excluded at their convenience. That ends now." James arrived that evening with takeout from the local Thai restaurant, joining Marcus and me for an impromptu strategy session. As a police officer, his perspective was invaluable. Based on the security footage, they clearly entered without permission. He confirmed that constitutes criminal trespass in this state. However, they could claim they believed they had implicit permission since Michael obtained the key through seemingly legitimate means. "So what are our options?" I asked, picking at my pad thai. "Several approaches," James said thoughtfully. "The most confrontational would be to report the trespass officially, which could result in criminal charges. Less severe would be to simply prevent their entry when they arrive and inform them they're not welcome without invitation." Marcus raised a third possibility. "Or you could allow them in on your terms. Let them arrive thinking they're surprising you only to find you fully prepared and in control of the situation. A psychological rather than legal approach." James nodded. Potentially very effective. The idea resonated with me. After years of being dismissed and marginalized, there was a certain appeal to turning the tables completely. I like that option, I decided. Let them come thinking I'll be pathetically grateful for their presence, only to discover I've built a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for their attention. We spent the next hour outlining a detailed plan for Christmas Eve. Marcus would arrive early, providing legal backup if needed. James would be present in his official capacity, his uniform a clear symbol of authority, and I would be ready to reclaim my narrative completely. There's one more thing I said as our planning concluded. I need to know exactly what they're expecting, which means I need to contact the one person who won't lie to me. The next morning, I called Ethan under the pretext of asking what he wanted for Christmas. "We're coming to see you," he blurted excitedly before I could even broach the subject. "Dad says we're all going to your new house for Christmas. It's supposed to be a surprise, but I already know." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone light. "Did Dad say when you're all coming?" "Christmas Eve. We're bringing all our presents and staying for 3 whole days. Mom says your house has lots of bedrooms for everyone. Did she? How thoughtful of her to make plans for my house. Dad says it's the perfect place for our family Christmas tradition." Ethan continued innocently. "He's bringing the special nog that grown-ups drink. And Aunt Samantha is planning where to put the Christmas tree. Uncle Daniel says there's probably a hot tub." Each word was a fresh revelation of their presumption. They weren't just visiting. They were appropriating my home entirely, planning to impose their traditions in my space without a single consideration for my wishes. After ending the call with Ethan, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. The completeness of their entitlement was breathtaking. They hadn't just excluded me from their Christmas plans for 5 years. They now intended to come and deer my private retreat for their own convenience. That evening, when James stopped by to install additional security cameras, I shared what I'd learned. "They're planning to stay for 3 days," I explained, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. "They've already decided where to put their tree, which rooms they'll use everything. Not a single one of them has actually asked if they're welcome here." James's expression darkened. "This goes beyond presumptuous. They're treating your home as community property." "Exactly." I handed him a cup of tea. Our evening ritual developing naturally over the past days, which means our Christmas Eve reception needs to be absolutely clear. This is my home, my life, my choice who enters and who doesn't. "Are you prepared for the potential fallout?" he asked gently. "Family confrontations around holidays can leave lasting damage." I gazed out at the snow-covered mountains, their enduring presence a reminder of my own newfound strength. "The damage has already been done, James. For 5 years, they've shown me exactly where I stand in their lives. All I'm doing now is showing them where they stand in mine." Christmas Eve morning dawned clear and cold sunlight glittering across untouched snow like scattered diamonds. I woke early, a mixture of determination and nervous energy propelling me through my morning routine. Today, everything would change. Either the beginning of honest relationships with my children or the final acknowledgement that those relationships had been irreparably damaged by years of neglect. I'd spent the previous day transforming the house into exactly the Christmas environment I wanted. No concessions to my children's preferences, no accommodations for grandchildren I rarely saw. Instead, I decorated with elegant simplicity. White lights woven through fresh pine garlands on the mantelpiece. A small, tasteful tree adorned with the antique glass ornaments my mother had left me, and sophisticated table settings for 3 myself, Marcus and James for Christmas Eve dinner. The guest rooms remained conspicuously untouched. No extra towels, no turn-on beds, no special accommodations for unexpected visitors. Every aspect of the house made one statement. This is my home, arranged for my pleasure, not a hotel awaiting your arrival. At 9 a.m., Marcus called to confirm his plans. "I'll arrive around 2, he said. "That gives us plenty of time to review everything before your children's expected arrival." "Perfect. James is coming at 1 to help with final security preparations. How are you feeling?" Ellie Marcus's voice softened with concern. I considered the question looking out at the pristine landscape remarkably calm. For the first time in years, I feel completely in control of my own life. After ending the call, I checked my appearance in the mirror. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, not the comfortable but shapeless clothes my children were accustomed to seeing me in, but a well-tailored burgundy dress that highlighted my still trim figure, paired with the pearl necklace David had given me on our 30th anniversary. My silver hair was freshly styled in a modern cut that framed my face elegantly, and I'd taken extra care with makeup, emphasizing my eyes. The woman looking back at me didn't resemble anyone's fading grandmother. She looked confident, sophisticated, and very much in command of her circumstances. James arrived precisely at 1, dressed in his full police uniform rather than the casual clothes I'd grown accustomed to seeing him in. The official appearance was intentional. We'd agreed his presence should communicate authority rather than merely friendship. "The roads are clear," he reported, stamping snow from his boots in the entryway. "No traffic issues that might delay their arrival." Good. Everything needs to proceed on our timeline, not theirs. We spent the next hour reviewing the security system and finalizing our strategy. James had positioned additional cameras to capture the driveway approach and every entrance to the house. All feeds were now displayed on multiple devices. The monitoring station in my office, James's tablet, and my phone, ensuring we'd have comprehensive awareness of my family's arrival and movements. "Remember," James said as we finished, "you're in control here. This is your house, your rules, your boundaries. Don't let them flip the script." "I won't," I promised, grateful for his steady presence. When Marcus arrived at 2 Oro bringing a bottle of expensive champagne for celebrating afterward, the 3 of us conducted a final walkthrough of the house. Every detail was perfect, from the elegant holiday decorations to the tantalizing aroma of the beef Wellington slowly cooking in the oven, a sophisticated Christmas Eve dinner for 3. "The table settings are a particularly nice touch," Marcus observed, nodding at the dining room with its 3 carefully arranged place settings. "The physical evidence that you weren't expecting them speaks volumes." That's precisely the point. I agreed. I've moved on, created my own traditions. They need to understand I'm no longer waiting by the phone for their attention. At 3:30, James' tablet chimed with an alert. "Vehicle approaching," he announced, showing us the feed from the driveway camera. Michael's SUV led the procession, followed by Samantha's crossover and Daniel's sports car. I counted heads as they parked. All 3 of my children, their spouses, and 5 grandchildren, ranging from Ethan's 8 years to Samantha's daughter, Lily's teenage 15. 10 people arriving unannounced, expecting accommodations in a house prepared for 3. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked quietly, standing beside me at the window as we watched them unload luggage and wrapped gifts. "Completely," I assured him. Though my heart had begun to race, James positioned himself discreetly in the kitchen, visible enough to be noticed, but not immediately confrontational. We watched on the monitor as Samantha approached the front door key in hand. Her first attempt to insert it failed, as did her second. Confusion crossed her face as she realized the locks had been changed. After a brief consultation with Michael, she pressed the doorbell instead. The chime echoed through the house. As I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and moved to answer it with deliberate, unhurried steps. Surprise multiple voices chorused as I opened the door, their faces arranged in expressions of exaggerated excitement that faltered slightly when they registered my appearance, elegant, composed, and clearly not surprised at all. "Hello," I said pleasantly, making no move to step aside and allow entry. "This is unexpected." Michael recovered first, his salesman's smile sliding back into place. "Merry Christmas, Mom. We thought we'd surprise you with a family holiday at your new place." He gestured expansively at the assembled group. "Everyone's here." "So I see," I replied, still blocking the doorway. "How thoughtful of you to decide how I should spend Christmas in my own home." An uncomfortable silence descended, as my less than enthusiastic response registered. Victoria, Michael's wife, shifted awkwardly beside him, while the younger grandchildren looked confused by the tension. Samantha's husband checked his watch impatiently. "Mom," Samantha said with a nervous laugh, "it's freezing out here. Can we come in?" "That depends," I said calmly. "Did any of you consider calling to ask if I was available to host 10 people for Christmas, or whether I had my own plans?" Daniel stepped forward, employing the cajoling tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. "Come on, Mom. We wanted to surprise you. You're always saying you want to see more of the grandkids. A surprise visit is dropping by for coffee. Daniel not arriving with luggage for a 3-day stay without invitation." Michael's expression darkened. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. It's Christmas. Families should be together." "I agree completely," I said, "which is why it's so interesting that this is the first Christmas in 5 years that any of you have wanted to include me in your plans. Coincidentally, right after I purchased a desirable mountain property." The stunned silence that followed was broken by Ethan's innocent voice. "Daddy, you said Grandma would be happy to see us." The genuine confusion in his voice nearly broke my resolve, but I reminded myself this wasn't about punishing my grandchildren. It was about establishing boundaries their parents had trampled for years. "I am always happy to see you, Ethan," I said gently. "But right now, I need to speak with your parents about some adult matters. Why don't you all come inside where it's warm and we'll sort this out?" I stepped aside, finally allowing them to enter the foyer, where they immediately noticed James standing in his police uniform, watching silently from the kitchen doorway. Michael froze, mid-step. "Mom, why is there a police officer in your house?" "This is Officer James Cooper," I said, closing the front door behind my bewildered family. "He's here because I have concerns about unauthorized entry to my home." Unauthorized entry. Samantha's voice rose in confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Perhaps we should all move to the living room," I suggested calmly. "Children, there's hot chocolate and cookies in the kitchen if you'd like some." Victoria hesitantly shepherded the younger grandchildren toward the kitchen, while 15-year-old Lily and 13-year-old Jacob remained clearly intrigued by the unfolding adult drama. Marcus stepped forward from where he'd been observing in the living room. "I'm Marcus Winters." He introduced himself with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Reynolds' attorney." Attorney Michael's face flushed. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I gestured toward the seating area. "Please sit down. We have matters to discuss before we determine whether this surprise visit of yours can proceed." They complied reluctantly, exchanging alarmed glances as they arranged themselves on the sofas facing the fireplace. I remained standing, a deliberate choice to maintain the position of authority in my home. 2 days ago, I began my voice steady. Samantha and Daniel entered this house without my knowledge or permission, using a key that Michael obtained through deception. "That's ridiculous," Daniel protested immediately. "We were just checking out the place," Samantha interjected, shooting him a warning glance. "We were excited about your new home, Mom." "So excited that you didn't bother to call first or knock or wait for an invitation." I gestured toward the large monitor on the wall, which James had cued with the security footage. "Perhaps this will refresh your memory." The screen came to life, showing Samantha and Daniel furtively approaching my front door, looking around before using the key. Their recorded voices filled the room as they wandered through my house, making comments about the furniture, discussing which bedrooms they'd claim for their families, and speculating about my finances. "Michael's already making plans. We're all coming up for Christmas. Surprise her," he says. Samantha's recorded voice echoed through the suddenly silent room as clears throat, if this is somehow still her decision. Her recorded laughter followed. I paused the footage, observing their reactions. Samantha's face had drained of color. Daniel stared at his shoes. Michael looked thunder ruck, perhaps realizing his siblings had implicated him directly. That's an invasion of privacy. Samantha finally sputtered. You can't just record people without their knowledge. Actually, James spoke for the first time, his official tone filling the room. Homeowners have the legal right to maintain security systems on their property, including video surveillance. What they don't have a right to do is enter someone else's home without permission, which is criminal trespass under state law. We had a key, Daniel protested. Obtained through false pretenses, Marcus countered smoothly. Michael contacted the real estate office claiming Mrs. Reynolds needed assistance due to mobility issues, a complete fabrication designed to gain unauthorized access to her property. All eyes turned to Michael, whose salesman's composure had completely evaporated. I was just trying to help, he said weakly. We wanted to see the place before Christmas. You could have asked, I said simply. You could have called and said, Mom, we'd love to see your new home. May we visit? Instead, you chose deception, invasion, and presumption. Presumption, Victoria had returned from settling the younger children in the kitchen. We're family. Family doesn't need formal invitations. Apparently, I do, I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. For 5 years, I've needed an invitation to Christmas gatherings that never came. 5 years of we're keeping it small this year, and we've made other plans. 5 years of seeing my grandchildren only when it was convenient for you. A heavy silence fell over the room. Lily, old enough to understand the implications, looked between her parents and me with dawning comprehension. You never invited Grandma for Christmas, she asked her mother. Not once in 5 years, Samantha shifted uncomfortably. It's complicated, honey. It's actually quite simple, I corrected gently. I became inconvenient after your grandfather died. Too much effort. Too old-fashioned, too unnecessary. Until I acquired something desirable, this house, and suddenly I'm worthy of inclusion in the family Christmas. That's not fair, Michael protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Then explain why you told Ethan I was busy this Christmas when you hadn't bothered to ask if I had plans. Explain why you felt entitled to enter my home without permission. Explain why you brought luggage for a 3-day stay without once considering whether I might want 10 unexpected house guests. No one seemed able to formulate a response. James shifted slightly, his uniform catching the light, a reminder of the potential consequences hovering over the situation. Are we, Daniel, finally ventured? Are we being charged with something that depends on you? I answered. I have no desire to press charges against my own children. What I want is acknowledgement, respect, and genuine connection, not to be treated as an afterthought or a convenience. Marcus stepped forward holding a document. Mrs. Reynolds has prepared a simple statement of understanding. It acknowledges the unauthorized entry establishes clear expectations about future visits requiring explicit invitation and outlines a path forward for rebuilding family relationships based on mutual respect. You want us to sign a contract to visit our own mother? Samantha asked incredulously. No, I corrected her. I want you to recognize that I am a person with autonomy, boundaries, and feelings, not a resource to be accessed when convenient and ignored when not. The document is merely a formal acknowledgement of that reality. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected voice. Lily, my teenage granddaughter, stood up from where she'd been sitting beside her mother. I'll sign it, she said firmly. Grandma deserves better than how we've treated her. The simple statement from a 15-year-old cut through the tension like a knife. Samantha looked at her daughter in surprise, then slowly back at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time in years. Mom, she began her carefully maintained facade, cracking slightly. We never meant to make you feel excluded. Intentions matter less than actions, I replied, not unkindly. For 5 years, your actions have spoken clearly about my place in your lives. Michael, ever the pragmatist, assessed the situation with newfound clarity. So where does this leave us now? Are we supposed to just leave? On Christmas Eve, I looked around at my children, their spouses, my grandchildren who were innocent parties in this adult conflict, the carefully prepared dinner for 3 in my dining room, the plans I'd made for a quiet, dignified holiday on my own terms. That, I said, finally depends entirely on what happens next. For several long moments, no one spoke. The crackling fire and distant sounds of the younger children in the kitchen were the only noises breaking the tense silence. I remained standing, watching my 3 adult children process the reality of their situation. Caught in deception, confronted with evidence, and finally facing consequences for years of thoughtless behavior. Michael was the first to recover, his businessman's instinct for damage control taking over. "Mom, clearly we've made some serious mistakes here." He began, his tone conciliatory. "We should have called first. Obviously, the key situation was inappropriate." Inappropriate, I repeated the word, letting its inadequacy hang in the air. "Breaking into my home and planning to commandeer it for your holiday convenience goes well beyond inappropriate, Michael." Samantha wiped discreetly at her eyes, her carefully applied makeup beginning to smudge. "We never thought of it as breaking in," she said quietly. "In our minds, you'd be happy to have us all together without asking me, without considering that I might have made my own plans after 5 years of solitary holidays." Daniel, always the most defensive of my children, shifted restlessly. "You're making it sound like we deliberately excluded you all these years. That's not fair. We've all been busy. Lives get complicated." "Too busy for a phone call," I interrupted. "Too complicated to extend a simple invitation. I never expected any of you to prioritize me above your own families, Daniel. I just wanted to be considered part of those families." Lily stood up suddenly. "I want to know why we never visited Grandma for Christmas," she announced, looking directly at her mother. "You always said she preferred quiet holidays, that she didn't like traveling in winter." Samantha flinched visibly. "Lily, please. This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," I countered. "Lily deserves honest answers. All the grandchildren do." I turned to my granddaughter, heart aching at how much she'd grown in the glimpses I'd been allowed of her life. "I never said I preferred quiet holidays, Lily. Quite the contrary, I've called every December for 5 years asking about Christmas plans." Victoria cleared her throat. "In all fairness, Eleanor, you have to admit you don't exactly fit with our usual celebrations. The children have certain expectations for Christmas, traditions we've established, traditions that deliberately excluded their grandmother." I finished for her. "How convenient to establish traditions that justified leaving me out." James shifted slightly from his position near the doorway, a subtle reminder of his presence. Perhaps he suggested professionally, "This would be a good moment to consider the agreement Mr. Winters mentioned." Marcus stepped forward with a document. "This isn't legally binding in a traditional sense," he explained. "Rather, it's a clear articulation of boundaries and expectations going forward. A reset, if you will." Michael accepted the papers, scanning them with a frown. "This feels excessive. We're family. We shouldn't need written agreements." "Apparently we do," I replied evenly, "because verbal understandings and basic respect haven't been sufficient." As Michael read through the document, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his small face troubled. "Is Christmas canceled?" he asked, looking around at the tense adult faces. The innocent question pierced through the confrontation, reminding me that my grandchildren were blameless in this situation. Whatever grievances I had with my children, the little ones deserved a joyful holiday. "No, sweetheart," I answered gently. "We're just deciding what kind of Christmas we're going to have." Victoria moved to shepherd Ethan back to the kitchen, but I raised my hand to stop her. "Let him stay. In fact, let's have all the children join us. They should understand what's happening. After the remaining grandchildren were gathered, I addressed them directly. I love all of you very much. I began making eye contact with each small face, and I've missed you terribly during all the holidays we haven't shared. Your parents and I are trying to figure out how we can be a better family going forward, one where everyone feels included and respected. 8-year-old Ethan frowned thoughtfully. Like when you tell us to use our words instead of grabbing toys, a ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the adults. The simple childhood parallel cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Exactly like that, I agreed. Sometimes even grown-ups need reminders about sharing and considering others' feelings. Michael set down the agreement, his expression conflicted. Mom, can we have a moment to discuss this privately as siblings? I nodded, gesturing toward the study. Take all the time you need. As my children filed out to confer, I turned my attention to my grandchildren, asking about school activities, interests making up for lost time in small ways. James discreetly stepped outside to give us privacy, while Marcus moved to the kitchen to prepare coffee. 15 minutes later, Michael, Samantha, and Daniel returned. Something in their demeanor had shifted, a newfound sobriety in place of their earlier defensiveness. We've talked it through. Michael said, serving as spokesperson, and we owe you an apology, a real one. He took a deep breath. After Dad died, it was easier to build our holidays around our children's needs and our social obligations than to consider how lonely you might be. We told ourselves you were fine, that you understood that it was just how things worked out each year. Samantha stepped forward, tears now flowing freely. The truth is, I didn't want to face holidays without Dad. Being here reminded me he was gone, and it was easier to just create distance. I never considered how much worse that made it for you. And when we discovered you had this beautiful mountain home, Daniel added, we were shocked, confused, and yes, opportunistic. Instead of being happy you'd found a new chapter, we immediately thought about how it could benefit us. Michael picked up the agreement. We'll sign this, Mom. Not because we need a legal document to behave like decent human beings, but as a symbol of our commitment to do better, to be better, and we understand if you want us to leave. Samantha added quietly. We arrived uninvited and presumptuous. Our feelings aren't the priority here. I looked at my children, really looked at them, seeing beyond my hurt to the flawed, complicated adults they'd become. In their faces, I could see traces of David, of myself, of the babies I'd once held, and the teenagers I'd guided. Imperfect people who had made selfish choices. Yes, but still my family. I don't want you to leave, I said finally, but I do want you to understand something fundamental. This is my home, my life built on my terms. You are welcome here when invited, when respectful, when genuinely interested in me as a person rather than what I can provide. I gestured toward the dining table with its elegant settings for 3. I had plans tonight. Dinner with Marcus and James, who have shown me more consideration in recent weeks than my own children have in years. Those plans will proceed. Taking a deep breath, I continued. However, there's a lodge in town with excellent last-minute accommodations. I suggest you all get settled there tonight. Then tomorrow, Christmas Day, you're welcome to return as invited guests. We'll have a proper holiday meal, exchange gifts, and begin the process of rebuilding what's been broken. A mixture of relief and chastened understanding passed across their faces as they realized I was offering a path forward. Not unconditional forgiveness, but an opportunity to earn back their place in my life. That sounds more than fair, Michael said quietly. More than we deserve, honestly. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to depart for the lodge, Lily approached me hesitantly. Grandma, would it be okay if I stayed here with you tonight? I'd like to help with Christmas preparations. Her request, so genuine, so untainted by the adult complications surrounding us, touched me deeply. "I'd like that very much," I replied, embracing her for the first time in far too long. After the caravan of vehicles departed for the lodge, an extraordinary silence settled over the house. James excused himself to change out of his uniform, promising to return for dinner as planned. Marcus opened the bottle of champagne he'd brought, pouring 3 glasses, one for himself, one for me, and one for Lily, which I replaced with sparkling cider, despite her protests that 15 was practically grown up in Europe. "Well," Marcus said, raising his glass. "That went rather differently than expected." "Did it?" I took a thoughtful sip. They reacted exactly as they always have, with surprise that I might have needs and boundaries of my own son. "But they signed the agreement," Lily pointed out clearly, still processing the afternoon's events. "That's something, isn't it?" "It's a beginning," I acknowledged. "Actions will matter more than signatures." As James returned in civilian clothes and we settled in for our originally planned dinner, Lily watched us with curious eyes. The elegant table, the sophisticated menu, the easy conversation flowing between the 3 adults. It was clearly not the grandmother she thought she knew. "You're different here," she observed as I served the beef. "Wellington more. I don't know yourself." "That's perceptive," I smiled at her. "For a long time after your grandfather died, I defined myself by my relationship to others. David's widow, your parents' mother, your grandmother. This place represents the first decision I've made solely for myself in decades." "Why didn't you tell anyone about buying it?" I considered her question carefully. I needed space to rediscover who I am when I'm not performing roles for other people. Your parents and uncles have had very specific expectations of who moms should be. Quiet, accommodating, grateful for whatever attention they deigned to give me. James nodded, understanding. "Reinvention requires distance sometimes." "Exactly." I agreed. I needed to hear my own voice again without it being immediately dismissed or overridden. Lily twisted her napkin thoughtfully. "Mom always talks about you like you're fragile, like you couldn't handle change or complexity. But you're not like that at all." "That perception served their narrative," Marcus observed. "If Eleanor was too fragile to handle family gatherings or too set in her ways to enjoy their modern celebrations, they could exclude her without guilt." "That's harsh," Lily protested, though her expression suggested she recognized the truth in his words. "But accurate," I said gently. "It's not a pleasant realization, I know, but part of growing up is recognizing that parents are flawed, complicated humans, not the perfect authorities we imagine in childhood." Our dinner stretched into a long evening of honest conversation. Lily asked questions about her grandfather, about my life before marriage, and children about my teaching career subjects her parents had rarely explored. I found myself speaking more freely than I had in years, no longer measuring my words against potential judgment or dismissal. When she finally yawned around 11:00, I showed her to one of the guest rooms, the blue room with its magnificent view of the moonlit mountains. "This would have been Mom and Dad's room, wouldn't it?" she asked, taking in the elegant furnishings. "If they'd stayed, probably. Your mother has always preferred blue." "I'm glad they're not here tonight," Lily confessed quietly. "It's nice having you to myself for once." After she'd settled in, I rejoined Marcus and James in the living room, where they sat nursing nightcaps by the fire. "She's a remarkable young woman," Marcus observed. "More insightful than her mother was at that age." "She reminds me of you," James added with a warm smile, clear-eyed about people's motivations. I was never that perceptive. At 15, I laughed, accepting the small glass of brandy Marcus offered. But I hope she maintains that clarity. It will serve her well. "What about tomorrow?" James asked, returning to practical matters. Are you ready for the full family invasion I considered this, watching the firelight dance across the ceiling? I think so. Today wasn't about punishing them. It was about establishing that I'm not a supporting character in their lives anymore. I have agency boundaries and expectations of my own. They needed that wake-up call, Marcus agreed, though I suspect old habits will reassert themselves if you're not vigilant. Probably, I acknowledged. But I'm not the same person they could dismiss so easily anymore. This place I gestured around the room that represented my independence isn't just a house. It's a statement about who I am now and how I expect to be treated. After Marcus and James departed with promises to check in tomorrow, I found myself alone in my mountain sanctuary, reflecting on the day's confrontation and surprising resolution. Everything had changed in ways I couldn't have predicted when I first discovered my children's planned invasion. I slept deeply that night, waking Christmas morning to find Lily already in the kitchen, attempting to make Belgian waffles using a recipe she'd found online. "I wanted to surprise you with breakfast," she explained sheepishly, flour dusting her cheek. "But I think I misunderstood how the waffle iron works." Together we salvaged the breakfast, laughing at the mishaps. As we ate at the kitchen island, she asked hesitantly, "Do you think today will be weird after yesterday?" "Probably," I admitted. "Growth usually involves some discomfort. Are you still mad at them?" I considered this carefully. Not mad exactly, disappointed certainly, but also hopeful that yesterday might have been the beginning of something better. By noon, my children began arriving from the lodge more tentatively this time, knocking respectfully and waiting to be invited in. They brought their overnight bags but left them in their vehicles until explicitly welcomed. Small changes that signaled they'd absorbed at least some of yesterday's lessons. Michael presented me with a beautifully wrapped package. "We got you something special," he explained. Before we knew about the house. It seems inadequate now, but we hope you'll like it." Inside was an elegant photo album professionally assembled with pictures spanning decades from my wedding to David, through the births of grandchildren and various family milestones. Many of the photos I'd never seen before. "We realized you might not have copies of a lot of these," Samantha explained, "especially the recent ones of the grandkids." The thoughtfulness of the gift, albeit late, touched me. "Thank you. This means a great deal." As the day progressed, a curious transformation unfolded. Without the presumption of control, my children seemed unsure how to behave in my home. They asked permission before using the kitchen, consulted me about activities, and generally exhibited a cautiousness that, while slightly awkward, represented a meaningful shift in dynamics. Daniel, helping me prepare vegetables for Christmas dinner, broke the careful politeness with unexpected candor. "I didn't realize how beautiful it is here," he said quietly. "I can see why you chose this place." "It speaks to me," I agreed. "The mountains have a permanence that's comforting somehow. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about being treated as an afterthought." He kept his eyes on the carrots he was chopping. "You're right. We've been selfish. After Dad died, it was easier to create distance than to face holidays with his empty chair at the table." "I understand that, Daniel." I felt his absence more acutely than anyone, but pushing me away only compounded the loss. He nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I know that now. We should have drawn closer together, not drifted apart." Similar moments of reflection occurred throughout the day, not dramatic apologies or complete transformations, but small acknowledgments of wrongdoing. Tentative steps toward reconnection. By evening, as we gathered around the Christmas dinner, I'd prepared the atmosphere had evolved from the strained politeness of mourning to something more authentically warm, not perfect, not instantly healed, but moving in a direction that felt for the first time in years like family. Christmas dinner marked a subtle but significant shift. Instead of the chaotic free-for-all that characterized holiday meals at my children's homes, Where conversations were fragmented, children were constantly excused for electronic diversions, and meals were rushed through to get to gifts or entertainment. We dined with intention. I'd set the table with my finest china, not the practical stoneware my children associated with their childhood home, but elegant bone china with platinum edging that David had given me for our 35th anniversary. Crystal glasses and sterling silver flateware completed the setting, creating an atmosphere of occasion rather than casual convenience. "Mom, this is beautiful," Samantha said, genuinely surprised as she took her place. "I don't think I've ever seen this china before. Your father gave it to me years ago," I explained, arranging the last place setting, but there never seemed to be an appropriate occasion to use it in the old house. "Why not?" Lily asked, carefully touching the delicate platinum rim of her plate. I considered my answer. I suppose I'd internalized the idea that beautiful things should be saved for someday, rather than enjoyed in the present. That's changed recently. Michael raised his eyebrows, along with quite a few other things, it seems. Yes, I agreed simply. Life is too short for waiting rooms, Michael. The past 5 years taught me that rather conclusively. Before he could respond, I asked everyone to be seated, making a point to place the youngest grandchildren beside their parents rather than clustered at a secondary kids' table. When everyone was arranged, I remained standing, lifting my glass. "I'd like to propose a toast." I said, my voice steady as all eyes turned to me, to new beginnings, honest connections, and the courage to rewrite stories that no longer serve us. There was a moment of collective consideration as my words registered. Then glasses were raised in response. Victoria, surprisingly, was the first to speak. To family, she added softly in all its complicated, imperfect glory. As we enjoyed the meal I'd prepared, more sophisticated than the traditional turkey dinner they would have expected, conversation flowed with surprising ease. The children included in the adult table, and conversation rose to the occasion with better manners than their parents had likely anticipated. Ethan, seated between Michael and Victoria, turned to me with genuine curiosity. "Grandma, where did you learn to cook like this? It's fancy like a restaurant." "I took cooking classes in the city last year," I explained. "French cuisine. I've always enjoyed cooking, but I wanted to expand my repertoire beyond the family meals you're familiar with." "You never mentioned cooking classes," Samantha said, a note of defensiveness creeping into her tone. "You never asked," I replied mildly. "After your father died, I developed several new interests and skills. The cooking classes, watercolor painting, even some investment seminars to better understand managing my finances." Daniel looked genuinely surprised. "I had no idea you were interested in investments." "There's quite a bit you don't know about me," I acknowledged without rancor. "I've changed substantially in the past 5 years. I'm starting to see," that he admitted. As dinner progressed, I observed my family with fresh eyes, without the weight of expectations, mine for inclusion, theirs for conformity to their image of me. We were discovering each other anew. My children asked questions about my life they'd never bothered to pose before. The grandchildren, witnessing this more authentic interaction, joined in with their own curiosities. After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. I'd prepared individual chocolate soufflés, another skill from my cooking classes, which elicited appreciative murmurs. "This is also different from our usual Christmas," Samantha observed, curling into an armchair with her soul. "More thoughtful somehow because it's Grandma's Christmas, not just a copy of everyone else's," Lily said wisely from her spot on the floor near the fire. Victoria studied me over her coffee cup. "I feel like we're meeting a different person than the mother-in-law I've known for 15 years. "Not different," I corrected gently. "Just more complete. For years, I allowed myself to be defined by my roles in your lives. Mother, grandmother, widow. This past year, I've reclaimed the other aspects of who I am." As evening deepened, the younger children grew tired. Michael checked his watch, then looked at me uncertainly. We should probably get back to the lodge soon. The little ones need their beds. I nodded, noting his careful phrasing, not presuming they would stay in my home overnight as originally planned. Of course, though. You're welcome to return tomorrow for breakfast if you'd like. Really, Samantha looked surprised at the invitation. Yes, I said simply. Today has been healing in many ways. I'd like to continue the conversation as they gathered their things, collecting scattered wrapping paper and children's new toys. The mood was markedly different from their entitled arrival yesterday. Each thanked me individually with varying degrees of sincerity and self-awareness, but all acknowledging that the day had unfolded in ways they hadn't anticipated. Lily hung back as the others headed toward their cars, approaching me with obvious hesitation. Would it be okay if I stayed again tonight? I'd like to help with breakfast tomorrow. Her request touched me deeply. I'd like that very much if your parents approve. Samantha, overhearing, seemed about to object, but stopped herself, visibly reconsidering. That would be fine, she said after a moment, if that's what you both want. After they'd all departed, Lily helped me with the dishes, moving around my kitchen with newfound familiarity. You know what I realized today? She said carefully, drying a crystal wine glass. I've never really known you, like the real you. What do you mean? At home, you're always just Grandma, the person who sends birthday cards and listens to Mom complain about work. But here you're a Lelanor, this whole interesting person with opinions and talents I never knew about. Her insight struck me profoundly. That's very perceptive, Lily. Is that why you bought this place to be Eleanor, instead of just Grandma? Partly, I acknowledge, though, the two aren't mutually exclusive. Being your grandmother is one of my greatest joys. I just needed space to be all the other parts of myself, too. Later, as we sat by the fire with mugs of hot chocolate, Lily asked tentatively, "Do you think they'll go back to how they were before once Christmas is over?" I considered her question carefully. Old patterns are powerful things. I suspect there will be backsliding and moments of forgetfulness, but I've changed the fundamental equation by establishing clear boundaries and expectations. And this house makes it real, she observed, looking around the space that so clearly expressed my independent identity. They can't pretend you're just sitting around waiting for their attention anymore. Exactly. I smiled, impressed by her insight. This house is both sanctuary and statement. I want to visit you here, she said suddenly. Not just with my parents or for holidays, just to spend time with you. Would that be okay? More than okay, I assured her, profoundly moved by her request. This home was meant for living fully, not in isolation. As we prepared for bed, Lily paused at her bedroom door. This has been the best Christmas I can remember, she said thoughtfully. Not because of presents or anything, but because it felt real. Real is a good word for it. I agreed. Authentic might be another. After she'd gone to her room, I stood at the great windows watching snow begin to fall softly over the mountains. The house around me, my house chosen for my pleasure alone, felt different tonight. No longer just a statement of independence or a refuge from exclusion, but the beginning of something new. A place where authentic family connections might finally have room to grow. Spring came to the mountains with gentle persistence, melting the snowdrifts into burbling streams and coaxing pale green buds from dormant branches. I'd been in my mountain home for nearly 4 months now, watching the seasons transform the landscape from pristine white to vibrant awakening. Much like the land around me, my relationship with my children had undergone its own thaw. Gradual, sometimes halting, but undeniably progressing. The changes hadn't happened overnight. January brought tentative phone calls, careful in tone and duration. February saw my first invitations to their homes, Genuine invitations with reasonable notice, not last-minute obligations or afterthoughts. March introduced a new pattern of Sunday video calls with the grandchildren scheduled weekly, rather than occurring sporadically when guilt prompted connection. Small changes that together represented significant shifts in the family dynamic. On this particular April morning, I stood on my deck with coffee surveying the property I'd come to love so deeply. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and new growth, invigorating and peaceful simultaneously. My phone chimed with a text from Lily, who had become my most consistent correspondent since Christmas. Finished my college application essay. Can I email it to you for feedback? It's about finding your voice later in life inspired by someone I know. I smiled, typing back my enthusiastic agreement. Lily's transformation over the past months had been particularly rewarding to witness, from somewhat self-absorbed teenager to thoughtful young woman developing her own value system, often distinct from her parents' materialistic priorities. The sound of tires on gravel drew my attention to the driveway where James's truck appeared around the bend. Since Christmas, our friendship had deepened into something neither of us had anticipated, a companionship that brought richness to both our lives. Not romance exactly, though perhaps edging in that direction with patient deliberation. We were both cautious people who valued clarity and intention in relationships. Morning, he called emerging from the vehicle with a bakery box in one hand and gardening tools in the other, ready to tackle those raised beds we talked about. We had planned a vegetable garden for the sunny southern exposure of the property, my first attempt at growing food rather than just ornamental plants. James, with his practical knowledge of mountain-growing conditions, had offered to help design and build the beds. Absolutely, I replied, meeting him at the bottom of the deck stairs, though I'm not sure I fully convinced myself that I have any talent for gardening. Talent is overrated, he said, handing me the bakery box. Persistence matters more. Plants respond to consistent attention, not natural aptitude. Rather like relationships, I observed, accepting the pastries with a grateful smile. Exactly like relationships, he agreed, his eyes crinkling at the corners. We spent the morning measuring and constructing the cedar frames that would hold my first gardening endeavor. The physical work was satisfying in ways my previous life had rarely offered, creating something tangible, useful, and potentially nourishing. Your son called me yesterday, James mentioned casually as we broke for lunch on the deck. I paused, surprised. Michael, whatever for. He wanted to know if I'd be here this weekend. Said he didn't want to interrupt if we had plans. The consideration implicit in this question, so different from the entitled assumptions of Christmas, warmed me unexpectedly. What did you tell him? That he should talk to you directly about your availability? James replied with a slight smile. Not assume I keep your calendar. Wise answer. He's trying Eleanor. They all are in their ways. I nodded thoughtfully. They are imperfectly, inconsistently, but genuinely trying. It's more than I expected, honestly. You changed the equation, James observed, made them see you as a complete person with agency and boundaries, not just a convenient mom figure to be accessed when needed and ignored when not. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Michael's name appearing on the screen as if our conversation had summoned him. Mom, he greeted me when I answered. Hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all. James and I are just having lunch after building some garden beds. A brief pause. That's actually why I'm calling. Victoria and I were wondering if we could bring the kids up this weekend. Ethan's been asking about your mountain house for weeks, and we thought a proper visit might be nice. The careful phrasing a request, rather than an assumption, wasn't lost on me. That would be lovely. Michael, when were you thinking of arriving Saturday morning? If that works for you, we'd get a room at that lodge in town, of course. Another meaningful difference from Christmas. No presumption they would stay in my home without explicit invitation. The lodge is lovely, but you're welcome to use the guest rooms if you prefer. I offered, finding I genuinely meant it. Just let me know so I can prepare accordingly. After finalizing the details and ending the call, I looked up to find James watching me with quiet approval. That sounded promisingly respectful, he observed. It was. I agreed. Though I'm still adjusting to this new version of Michael who actually asks, rather than informs, "Do you trust it will last?" I considered the question carefully. I trust that the dynamic has fundamentally changed, whether every interaction will reflect that change perfectly. That's another matter. Old habits resurface, but the baseline has shifted because you shifted first. He pointed out you stopped accepting the role they'd assigned you. Later that afternoon, as James was leaving, Marcus called to check in our weekly conversation that had continued faithfully since Christmas. I brought him up to date on the garden project and Michael's upcoming visit. "Sounds like progress continues," he noted approvingly. "How are you feeling about all of it?" I glanced around at my home, so thoroughly mine in every detail from the art on the walls to the garden beds, taking shape outside. "Content," I replied truthfully. "Not because everything is perfect with my children, but because my happiness no longer depends on their approval or inclusion. That's the real victory," Marcus observed. "Independence of spirit, not just living situation." That evening, as twilight settled over the mountains, I walked the perimeter of my property, mentally mapping where I might plant flowering shrubs to attract butterflies, where a bench might offer the perfect spot for morning meditation, where wind chimes would catch the afternoon breezes, small additions to make this place even more distinctly mine. My phone chimed with an email from Lily, her college essay attached, with a nervous message asking for my honest opinion. I settled into my favorite chair by the window to read it, touched that she valued my perspective so highly. The essay was beautifully written, exploring how witnessing my transformation had inspired her own reconsideration of priorities and authentic self-expression. She wrote of Christmas Eve, the night she'd stayed behind when the others went to the lodge, as a turning point in her understanding of what it meant to live intentionally rather than according to others' expectations. In watching my grandmother reclaim her identity beyond the roles assigned to her, she wrote, "I began to question which parts of my own identity were authentic and which were performances designed to secure approval. Her courage in establishing boundaries, even when painful, showed me that genuine relationships must be built on mutual respect rather than obligation or convenience." Tears welled unexpectedly as I read her words. Of all the outcomes I'd imagined when I purchased this mountain sanctuary, peace-independent self-discovery, I never anticipated becoming a model of empowerment for my teenage granddaughter. The realization crystallized something I'd been feeling increasingly over the past months. This home, initially acquired as a reaction to exclusion, a statement of independence born from hurt, had evolved into something far more positive. Not a retreat from painful relationships, but a foundation for authentic ones. Not an ending, but a beginning. I composed a thoughtful response to Lily, praising both her writing skills and her insights, then stepped onto the deck to watch the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The mountain air carried the scent of earth, awakening of possibilities unfolding. 5 months ago, I'd stood in the same spot, nursing wounds of exclusion and steeling myself for confrontation. Now I stood in quiet anticipation of Saturday's family visit, not desperate for their approval, not anxious about their judgment, but genuinely looking forward to continuing our collective journey toward more honest connection. The mountain house had served its purpose not as the dramatic statement of independence I'd initially imagined, but as the solid foundation for a life rebuilt on my own terms, a life with room for family, for friendship, for growth, for discovery. A life where being forgotten for Christmas had led through unexpected pathways to being truly seen for the first time in years. I smiled up at the emerging stars, feeling both grounded and free, like the mountains themselves, standing firm while reaching skyward.